Hello everybody, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today we're going to do a watercolor, but it's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to look at a picture of a Thomas Cole painting and sketch it in watercolor and just have some fun. The painting is the Oxbow. I have a print of it hanging up in my classroom. I'm a school teacher. I don't know if you know that, but now you do. And every so often, I find myself needing to walk over and gaze off into the Oxbow. So in front of me, I have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua. It is a 140-pound cold press, 100% cotton. So with this, going to kind of play with the colors as I go along, see what happens. And I think I'm going to start off with cerulean. I'll play around. I'm not too up on my Thomas Cole history, but he was a painter in the Hudson River Valley movement. I think he essentially defined the movement, and it was a picturesque paintings, landscapes of American scenes. And I think sometimes he would do stuff that was outside of that norm, and people would get mad when he would do something outside of that. Anyway, so here's a little bit of cerulean blue. I picked up some raw sienna just because of the placement on the palette. I'm going to use yellow ochre to map out the landscape. Now keep in mind that the original is an oil painting, and it's an oil painting by a master, and I'm just an amateur painter having fun and experimenting and seeing what we can learn from a sketch of a master painting. Now, currently I'm just kind of mapping out locations. I don't really sketch with the pencil. We'll grab a little bit more cerulean to put in our water, the Oxbow itself. And I will say this, I find that I progress art-wise if I sit there and I do a long-term, and by long-term I mean half hour to 2 hours, pen and ink study of a master painting. I feel like it forces me to look beyond the initial impression of the painting, and then I start learning from it. The same thing can and should happen with watercolor studies. Here's some raw sienna mapping out this greenery just to get that shape in place. Since I'm painting wet and wet, I have to work relatively fast. Let's grab alizarin crimson and Payne's gray. This will be for our storm coming in. I will say this, within the Asian cultures, the best way, the way that learning took place within the arts and whatnot, was to do imitation paintings and drawings of master works. And in college, I went to a college in America, and I'm American, we would learn from sketching. We did a sketch of Picasso's portraiture of people. It wasn't when he had like the eyes and stuff all over the place. It was just like line drawing portraiture. And then I think in one class we were given, we could pick from some postcards, I think from a museum, and do something from that in, what was it, in pastels. And I did a Cezanne of the card players. I think it was called the card players. I'm going to use paper towel to lift these white clouds. I wish I had went bluer here. And in an oil painting class, we got to pick from a selection of paintings to follow along with, and I followed along with a Van Gogh. So within the Western learning, there's a lot of following along. And in fact, I highly encourage you, and say very freely, y'all can follow along with anything that I do on this channel, with the added thing that if you want to sell the said item, you can. You have my permission. And that's to help you, get art supplies, build that confidence, and also put a piece of work in somebody else's life. And of course, I would love for you to consider supporting this channel. If you can't, I understand. If you don't want to, I understand. It's totally fine. But you can support the channel by liking and subscribing. I do have paintings for sale on Etsy, linked below. But I also have the Patreon and other ways you can donate. So give them a look. All right, let me go back to the yellow ochre. And we'll start shaping this out. I'm going to come back in for that distant mountain in a moment once it dries. I don't use yellow ochre often, so I almost feel like a little out of a loss thinking, what would I mix with it to darken it some? I'm going to mix a little bit of ultramarine in. Yellow ochre, people will usually leave off the watercolor palette, mainly because of its opacity, and people will usually go with raw sienna. But feel free to play around with both. In fact, in another video, I think I was painting along in the style of Beksinski, a Polish painter who is now deceased, oil painter, and I used yellow ochre in that case. So I think it's just that opacity helps for me to mimic the feel of oil paintings. This is ultramarine mixed into that raw yellow ochre. Shaping out this greenery. And it cuts in here. And a far distant cloud shadow. That's what I'm attempting to achieve with that same mix. It's interesting how one thing that when I look at this painting on the wall in my classroom, the print, the storm clouds here, and there's small little villages and houses that you can see in the actual painting that have smoke rising from it. How he took that white paint and passed over and created that. And I thought about how you do it in oil. You know, taking the white paint, probably on a glazing stage, and then doing a scumbling. This is yellow, lemon yellow into the mix. Anyway, with light red oxide caught onto it. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, the scumbling that he would use in an oil painting, I figured just a little bit of maybe buff tighten or something along the lines of that would give that effect in a watercolor painting. But I don't know if I'd really want to try to achieve that. Grab a little bit of burnt sienna. That'll help that out. Wonderful benefit from if we could get any lifting to take place right here to lighten that spot up in the water. Okay, I'm going to grab some sap green. With sap green, I try not to use it that often. And if I do use it, I try to use it in the later half of a painting. It seems to be working pretty well. You could probably pull out a little bit of texture here for foliage. Mix that with some burnt Payne's Gray. Why am I mixing up all my colors wrong today? Payne's Gray. We can use a card if I could find a nice rounded piece to start scraping out this big tree. One thing that came to mind with the tree was, and I don't remember where I had read this, but I think it was more the tonalist movement, which was a little bit after this art movement, that the paintings that would mimic the eye would kind of diffuse near the edges, and they wouldn't be as there wouldn't be as much contrast at the edges. And if you look at this painting, the dark tree with the dark branches really blends in to that storm in the background. And I'm sure that I'm going to push it too far forward, but it's something interesting to consider and to keep in mind how your eye, if you were looking at something like this, would diffuse and soften everything on the outside of it. We have this rock here. In fact, the thing that is great about Hudson River Valley paintings is after you look at it for a while, you start finding things that you didn't notice immediately. In this one, there is a painter painting right in the spot, and he has his umbrella and pack right up here. Let's get some textures. Put that Payne's Gray on the darker side And even grab some yellow ochre for that brighter side. You can probably tell that the paper's drying pretty quick at this point. So what I want to do is grab the #1 rigger, and I want to get a few more effects back in here while it's a little wet so it softens some more. We'll get some dry brushing, which is fine, so we'll get a mixture of effects here. There's that far ridge. I need to wet this some. To be careful, I don't want to get cauliflower effects back here. Okay, we'll go back there. Then he has a lot of fields that kind of crisscross applesauce. I'm just gonna use the side of this brush to create those field and tree lines. I think that's good enough for our effect. We can take this guy and add some branches. It's just Payne's gray. I think at this point we have a relatively solid foundation, and we could push it and paint it as much as we want. But being that it's just a a YouTube demo and a starting point, we're not going to go into too much depth. Just using this rigger to lay down some solid yellow ochre. Excuse me. We have that painter right in here. I don't even know how I would be able to really model it that small. His umbrella is right here, which helps break that river scene. Far distant dots. Branches. So I'm just kind of making calligraphy type strokes to get the ideas in place. You're more than welcome to use this as a starting point and then jump off and have fun with it. When you really look at this painting, like sitting there looking at it, and the detail in the ferns and the bushes and everything, there's just so much going on. To be able to paint like that would be very cool. And we could do a little stippling and grab some lemon yellow. I'm thinking that maybe, you know what, I might make this a two-parter. I'll call it here in a moment. We'll do a dry off just to see what it looks like. But I think I'll put this guy on the side, and then at a later date, maybe come back in over it and paint over it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm gonna pause this. So I'm gonna pause it while I do a dry off. All right, and there we go. So yeah, let me know what you think of the comments. If you want to see this progress any further, if you'd like to see me kind of do quick sketches from other artists, let me know. Of course, once again, please like, subscribe, follow. You are more than welcome to follow along. And please consider supporting this channel on Patreon or other avenues. You all have a great day. Thank you so much for watching.